Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest Lunch and Learn from AMPIA. My name is Jenny Steele. I'm a producer here in Calgary, and I'm so excited to be your moderator today. It's going to be a very awesome session. Now, before we get started, we wish to acknowledge the traditional homelands of the Indigenous peoples of this land, including the nations of Treaty 6, 7, and 8, and the Métis Nation of Alberta. Our hearts are with this community during this difficult time. We are grateful to work, live, and create upon this territory. As the original storytellers and keepers of this land, we have much to learn from the First Nation and Métis people. Now today we gratefully welcome Heidi Zwicker, who is a senior programmer for the Sundance Film Festival, focusing on international and US narrative feature films, midnight, and shorts. She has been contributing to various Sundance Institute programs for over 10 years. National. Heidi was a programmer at Palm Springs International Short Fest from 2011 to 2014 and is also senior programmer at the Provincetown International Film Festival. Originally from the North Shore of Boston, she has a degree in English from the University of Massachusetts and an MA in Critical Studies of Film and Television from UCLA. Now, before we begin, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping notes to explain how today's Lunch and Learn will work. Now, at regular intervals over the next hour, we will answer questions that come in just so that we don't run out of time at the very end. And we encourage you to put those questions in the comments bar to the right because that's also how we know who is attending. We want to thank Alberta Film, the Edmonton Arts Council, and Telefilm for helping us put on this webinar and for supporting professional development in our province. And now for the exciting part. If you're an AMPIA member, please email Colette Switzer directly at info@ampia.org with your name or company name to be entered into the draw for a $500 AMPIA Development Funds Award. And be sure to stick around till the end of the webinar because you need to be online if your name is drawn to accept your prize. We'll be hosting a lot more events like this throughout 2021. So if you're not an AMPIA member, trust me, now is the time to join. And just a quick reminder for all of our attendees that we are here today for Heidi's expertise on the festival and not the Institute. So please keep that in mind when submitting your questions. And with that said, it's now time to meet our lovely speaker. So please let's welcome Heidi Zwicker.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Jenny, so much for having me.
Of course. Thank you so much for being with us today. It's such a pleasure. Now, to kick things off, we'd love to just hear more about you. You've been in the industry with Sundance now for over 10 years. But how did you get your start and how did you get involved with Sundance?
Absolutely. I was one of those people that always loved film and television and didn't ever actually see a path for myself into the industry. And so when I went to UCLA for my master's in critical studies of films and television, I thought maybe I'd be an academic, but didn't really know like what my career path would be. I got there and academia wasn't quite right for me, but I was incredibly lucky in that one of my colleagues at school was an intern at Sundance. And they were looking for people at that point to read scripts for the feature film program. And that's actually how I started in the industry at all, really having no hands-on experience prior to that. They liked my taste. I never thought that loving film and loving international film would be a marketable skill, but as it turned out, it got me in the door at Sundance. And the next year, they were expanding their international program on the festival side, and they were looking for screeners. So I was a screener for the festival for a few years before I came on board full-time as the World Cinema Coordinator. And from there, I've just sort of worked my way up into the programming team. So although I've worked other places since, my entry into Sundance really was my entry into the industry. So I've learned a lot through that.
That's amazing. I love that. Learning on the job, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Awesome. Now, can you talk about your role as a senior programmer? What does that entail and what do you look for when programming films?
Sure. So as a senior programmer, I've sort of worked my way up. When I said I began as a World Cinema Coordinator, I basically began very specifically looking at international narrative features. You know, as you sort of move up in the organization, you have more responsibilities, but also you're looking at more films. So now as a senior programmer, I'm one of the people who makes the decisions on films across all categories. There are areas where I specialize, but as a programming team, part of our process is that we all watch all the final contenders. And I am in sort of a unique place amongst the team in that I'm the only programmer who does both features and shorts. So I'm on both of those teams watching all of the final contenders. In addition to that, there are additional responsibilities as a senior programmer. And I'm so glad you asked, because the first time someone asked me, like, what does it mean to be senior? Does this mean you're old and you've been there a long time? And I was so taken aback. I was like, yeah, something like that, but it's not that. I do have additional responsibilities beyond programming film. I oversee our Sundance Film Festival Asia, and I oversee our filmmaker industry interactions at the festival for programmed filmmakers. So there are additional responsibilities that come along with it. But just to talk about what it is to be a programmer in general at Sundance, it's been a little different in this last year and a half, because normally I would say slightly more than half of my year I'm traveling. I'm going to other festivals and markets and learning about projects that haven't even been made yet, so that we can track them. And it's really only the other slightly less than half of the year that I'm locked in my apartment watching films. So it's kind of a great job, because you're spending like each half of the year doing something totally different, except for this last year, which is obviously for me, as everybody else, locked in my house all the time.
Exactly. And we're obviously going to address how you adjusted to this past year at the end of the chat, just in case anyone's wondering. Okay, so now for someone who has never been to a film festival before, could you give us a top level overview of what the Sundance experience is like?
So I would say, in a word, that the Sundance experience is absolutely overwhelming. Different festivals are of different sizes and shapes. And with Sundance, I think the benefit and the daunting thing is that there is such a plethora of opportunities. It can be really challenging to navigate. It's something that, we have a large amount of departments and teams to try to help selected filmmakers navigate that experience. But a lot of it is going to come down to the film team, and specifically the producers, to curate that experience for your own team, to decide your priorities for your project, and what are the most important things for you to pursue in your festival experience. Because I will say, it really is, it's wonderful, but it's like no shortage of socializing opportunities, no shortage of industry meeting opportunities, no shortage of audience interaction opportunities. And there's a lot to navigate and sort of prioritize, and also really, really important, delegate amongst the members of your team to make sure you're capitalizing on all the things that are important to you.
Interesting. Is it one of those experiences where, how sometimes they say, oh yeah, the more you do it, you're going to get more comfortable? Or is it just every time you go back, is it always that same rush and overwhelming feeling, do you think?
I mean, I think it's sort of always overwhelming,
Yeah.
but you do sort of get a shorthand. It's funny, what I say honestly to staff on the staff side of Sundance is like, your first one almost doesn't count, because you're learning constantly. And you have to take that and apply it in the future. And obviously festivals, you when you're a filmmaker, you have one shot, and you have so much you have to try to learn, and we're going to be there to help you. We have, our artist relations team and industry relations team, so many people to support you. But at the end of the day, there's going to be so many choices every filmmaker has to make, every film team has to make. And I will say, sadly, and we love it when filmmakers see other movies, it can be the most challenging thing to do at our festival, as opposed to some other festivals that have a smaller footprint around them, because there's so many things to do. Sometimes seeing movies gets lost, and that's a shame, because we're obviously extremely proud of the films we're showing, and you should see other movies when you come to Sundance.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, now you kind of touched on this a little bit before now. How important is a festival strategy, and what does that actually mean? Can you explain what the process is to develop a festival strategy, including considerations if a project anticipates a festival route?
Absolutely. I am a person who thinks that festival strategy is incredibly important. And I say that with, I think, a full understanding of how incredibly challenging it can be to set one. Because what it means is getting to know the festivals that you're considering applying to, knowing whether they have premiere requirements. Like, that can really sort of set a calendar for the way that you're going to approach your festival submissions for a year. Knowing which festivals may give you early feedback and which may not. And even after you've set a world premiere, I strongly suggest kind of having a path in mind, that your priority festivals that are going to set the life for your project moving forward that you want it to be. And so what it involves largely is a lot of research into what the profile of festivals are. And now that's not only whether you think your film is a right fit for that festival. So look at films they've programmed in the past. Do they feel like, if they like that film, will they like your film? I mean, it's a guessing game, but it does help if you're like, oh, I hate all of the films this festival has played in the past. Maybe your film is different than what that festival's taste is. But also like whether that festival can provide for you the experience that you want. So it's really like both. Is the festival right for you? Are you right for the festival? And it's a lot of research, and there's a degree of it that is, you're an educated guess. But I think it's so much better than when there's a world of so many festivals, and you can feel just like you're like throwing a dart at the wall, to try to be informed and just have like a calendar strategy.
Mm-hmm. It's like a dating game. Are we right for each other? Which one do I go with? Oh my goodness. Okay, now I'm going to rewind back now. Savithri has a question. They're saying, you say that you watch all the final contenders. Can you say a little bit about the steps through which a submitted film goes through before becoming a final contender?
Absolutely. So when I say that, like, for instance, every programmer on my team has sort of like a path. So like for me, what I watch is still what I began with was, international narrative features. That's what I watch the most of. I watch a ton of submitted international narrative features. There are other people like that. So when I see ones I like, I start sharing them with my other colleagues who focus largely on international narrative features. Now, after that, I'm on the overall fiction team, right? So then the US folks and the international folks are sharing sort of like the next level up of contenders. And then when we get to like our real absolute favorites, we absolutely share them with the doc team, and the doc team shares their favorites with us. So that is our process. It's not the most efficient process, but for us, the entire team weighs in on all the final contenders, and we make decisions as a group. We really believe that this helps us make the best decisions possible. Like, if it's just me, and I know other festivals work this way, and I really love 2 films, but I only have a spot for one, it's not random, but it almost feels random, like which one I choose. But when I'm hearing from colleagues and getting feedback and other opinions, I think it makes us make a better opinion, because we're reflective. We're a diverse group of people from different backgrounds and parts of the world. And so I really like the way we program. I do also want to say, because I think it's something you should know about festivals, is that we do employ screeners for our feature sections. And so those people are the first people to watch a lot of films, not every film necessarily. Some may go directly to programmers, just depending on the number. We do get a lot of submissions. Now, those first people will watch the film beginning to end, no matter what. And I say that, as I said, a former screener. So please believe me, sometimes I would watch films that were truly appalling, and I would watch them beginning to end, no matter what, and provide detailed notes so that people like me, and we're always going to check them, but, I'm going to have notes to go by, and I can see like where the plot is going, what someone else responded to in the film as I'm doing the second watch. I also think it's really important for me to say, because it's something that I feel strongly about. Sundance's screeners are a strongly vetted group, and they're a group that are paid for their work. A lot of festivals use volunteer screeners, which, depending on the festival and the atmosphere, can be okay. But I believe that people work better when they're rewarded for that work. Mm-hmm. And we have a relationship and a trust with our screeners because we have to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said back when you're like, you could choose your final pick, but collaboration is key. And there's something about, getting everyone's insight to know that, okay, this is the film that deserves to be in the final group.
Absolutely. And I do want to say, it's not like, it's not like consensus. It's not like, raise your hand, majority rules. We have a conversation about films, because one person in that group can see a film in a certain way and know why it's so essential to play that film. And until I hear their point of view, I haven't seen that, because it wasn't my perspective. And so that's why I think it's really, really valuable. It's not just like, oh, majority rule, that movie's in.
Absolutely. Okay, we've got another question here. This is from Treaty 6 Productions. How does someone become a screener for Sundance?
They can submit through our programming at sundance.org email to say that they're interested in being a screener. We will look at your resume. We probably will interview you. Again, they're generally, they are people who are working in the industry or academia. They're people whose taste we trust. But like, we are always, like, every year looking for new screeners. And it's sort of like a process where, I should also say, we reevaluate our screening team every year to make sure that they're still delivering the work that we need them to have, because it's so important.
Absolutely. And then another question from Geraldine. Do you also have screeners for your short films?
We do not. And I will say that is because we receive so many short films. It actually wouldn't save on labor if there was going to be 2 people watching them. So all of our shorts programmers, besides me, because I'm also watching features, commits to first watching a very large number of shorts. And then they put forward all the ones they like. And then everybody, once again, watches all of those finalists. And those are all the films that I watch as well. And that's where we select our program. So just in terms of like, if every film that someone liked was then watched by a second set of eyes, the labor on shorts would be intense, because we do get pretty consistently in the last few years about 10,000 short submissions.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. Okay, this next question's from YEG Film Channel, but I'm going to say, I think we're going to get to it in my question. So I'm going to do this one first, and if we don't, we'll come back to that one. But how do large festivals like yours support filmmakers coming in? On platforms like Film Freeway or Without a Box, there are thousands of festivals, and filmmakers could spend thousands of dollars trying to get in.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I mean, and it absolutely can be tough. And again, I'm going to just sort of quickly first reiterate, that's why it's so important to look into the festivals you plan to submit to. Like, I can understand, like, you know, like more submissions increases your chances, but make sure you're submitting to a festival that you want to play, that has a reason that it is valuable to you, because otherwise it's sort of lost money even if you get in, if it doesn't have a real value to you or your project. But in terms of like what we can do, what we do is then turn that around and try to use every bit of our resources for the selected filmmakers. When we're a large festival, we are a large festival in terms of, you know, the opportunities create and the number of submissions we receive. We're not actually a huge festival in terms of the number of films we play. And because of that, that allows us to offer a certain degree of an intensity of support and collaboration for our filmmakers, which is really important to us, that we're making sure our filmmakers have the experience they want to out of Sundance. So that's sort of like how we try to like really make sure that we're maximizing the value for those filmmakers who did trust us with their films and that we did select. The other thing I will say is that the film festival community is actually a really small one, especially the programming world. And what we can absolutely do is recommend films to other festivals that we think they're a good fit for. And that's something that we do every year, all the time, because, and this is funny, it's something I usually lead off with, but I always want to say it because I want to make sure it's really clear. When you see as many films as we see, and we play as few as we're able to play, there are many films we love every year that we just aren't able to play. And we still want the best for those films, and we still hope to find opportunities for those films. Honestly, in our programming process, loving the film is almost like the first step. And then there are all these more steps to creating a program. Which films do we think we can serve? So honestly, it is a collaboration with other film festivals, and recommending films is something else that we're very, very happy to do and feels important.
That's awesome. I love that. Okay, now let's talk about the passes. Now, how does an industry pass differ from an attendee pass? What value comes from an industry pass, and how do you leverage both?
I mean, essentially, and I apologize that I don't know the details of every single pass at Sundance because there's a lot and it's daunting. But essentially, you know, every time you're buying like a premium pass, whether industry or audience, it's, you know, we're trying to make sure you get in to see the films that you want to see and you have that priority access to films. With the press and industry passes, you have the separate press and industry screenings as well, screenings especially carved out for you in addition to your ability to see the public screenings. That's because, you know, with an industry pass, we're considering those, you know, those constituents, people who absolutely have to see the films to be able to do their job and capitalize on their festival experience. We want every general audience member, every filmmaker to be able to see the films they want to see. But when it actually comes to like, you know, and it happens, you know, a few times every year, a film that is just such an overflow interest around the film, there's no way that we can get every single person in the door. We want to make sure that there are those opportunities for the press and industry who absolutely need to see the film to do their job, because them doing their job is actually the thing that's creating more opportunities for the film. So it's actually the thing that's most productive for the filmmakers, who are the people we're really trying to support.
Okay, awesome. I'm going to go back again. So YEG Film Channel's asking, does Sundance pay for screening fees?
We do not pay screening fees.
Okay, perfect. Okay, now back to the passes. Now, how do you leverage and make the most of your festival experience? What meetings or events do you think are the most valuable to market a film or filmmaker?
Now it's interesting because like I feel like I'm probably going to answer this in a Sundance way, but I want to say first that it absolutely depends on the festival that you're attending with your film and the needs of your project. Sundance, as many of you probably know, we do not have a formal market. We have tons of opportunities, but they do require a little more legwork on your end because unlike, Berlinale, like which has a very like clearly defined formal market, you have to kind of make those meetings a little bit on your own or find the opportunities that we're creating for you. And again, they're there and we tell you them. And what I hear year in and year out from filmmakers is it can be overwhelming, just the number of opportunities, just deciding which are the ones that are right for you. So how do you leverage and make the most of your festival experience is really prioritizing beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would say, obviously, the bulk of projects at the festival, not all, but their main priority is finding distribution for their current project.
Right.
And so there are a lot of opportunities around that. And, and I think that is a very reasonable primary focus. However, there are a lot of additional opportunities at our festival that I think we always encourage people not to sort of close their eyes to. Because one thing about our festival profile is that we basically bring together all of North American industry. So, there can be future collaborators, funders for future projects. If you have interest in other fields like, episodic or even the virtual reality new frontier space, there are collaborators and funders. There's a lot of other festivals at Sundance. So if you have that festival strategy and you're trying to chart your path, there's a lot of other festivals in attendance at our festival. So there's a lot of sort of different opportunities. And the best way to really leverage it is to have a strategy, but be flexible.
Right. Yeah, I guess if you have that strategy, you just kind of stay focused. But then once you are there, I'm sure there's opportunity to just, okay, forget this. This looks more like my end goal.
And it's also knowing your strengths as a team, right? I mean, I think, there's tons of social events. Now, some, people, depending on temperament and ability, can turn a social event into an absolute industry opportunity. Mm-hmm. And there are some people who are less skilled in that way. And knowing yourself and what you're going to be able to leverage is also important.
Yeah. Now, speaking of social events, what is the etiquette for pitching a project? Because I know sometimes at these social events, filmmakers and producers can be quite forward. So in your opinion, what's the best strategy or location to present your idea or film?
I mean, obviously, if you can do it in these areas that are more industry, market focused, if it's a social event that is a filmmaker industry mixer, then obviously that's what it's for. That's why they've come. I feel you can feel you have more carte blanche to make that approach. If it's someone else's party, I think it really requires a lot of awareness of social cues. I think absolutely if someone is not super engaged in another conversation and you see an opportunity to introduce yourself, then absolutely. But it's you're not going to do yourself any favors by continuing to talk to someone who may not be displaying a lot of interest. So I think it's if you can just get your name, get your project, get your card in the hand of someone, then I think that you can consider that absolutely a good interaction. And you can always follow up later. Email addresses are not that hard to find.
Yeah.
But I think, in what we have every year and other festivals have are social events specifically designed around interacting between industry and filmmakers. And that's what, that's when you should feel empowered. That's why those people have come, because they want to meet you and hear about what you're doing. And that's really the best opportunity. I will say, I don't want to be negative or discourage people, but I will say even me, and I'm not, I'm not a big buyer, seller, huge figure, but even me, it can be tough when I'll give an example where I was attending a market at another festival, and by sheer chance, the table that they had placed me at was sort of public facing, and it had a little Sundance placard on my table. And so I was already volunteering my time to meet with filmmakers and discuss their project. And whenever I was supposed to have a 3-minute break between projects, someone would just jump on my table and say, "Hey, can we get you?" And it was really tough because I don't want to be rude, I don't want to be discouraging, but also it can be exhausting. These people that you're hoping to get the time and attention of are still people. And I will say it didn't, I wasn't closing my mind off to their projects, but it didn't endear me to that, like them to me, that like, they were like, I'm like, I just need a minute to take a drink of water. And so that can be like, you really sort of just have to read that moment, because I think there are social opportunities where people, that's why they're there, to meet you and to hear about you. And there are some where it doesn't quite feel right. And you should listen to that, that social cue that it's not the right moment.
Exactly. You have to read the room. Can I ask, like, what is the success rate of, say, those get together, like those social gatherings where someone will just come and approach you? Does it typically like work, or is it more of like a deterrent?
I mean, for me, if you're like, I mean, that's the thing is like, for me, if you're saying like, I have a project I want you to see, I'm giving you my card, I'm asking for your card, and then later you just email me, then that's great. I will track that project and I would look forward to seeing it. If someone's really kind of monopolizing my time, insisting on giving me a full pitch, and I will say, it also depends on the sort of person you're talking to. Like as a programmer, nothing you pitch is going to be the thing that convinces me. I need to see your film.
Yeah.
Like, so you're not going to persuade me, and that can be tough. Where people, you have that moment of someone's attention, you want to persuade them, and I feel like that is not necessarily something that has a high degree of success. But I mean, when I'm attending festivals and markets, it really is because I'm one of those people. I want to hear about your projects, and I want to meet you. But I also want to be able to pee when I have to.
Yes, exactly. Give me some time. Oh my gosh. Okay, now on average, how many Canadian films do you take a year for narrative, doc, and shorts?
So it fluctuates, and I looked at this year's totals, so just sort of like be kind of like an example. I will say, obviously, this year was a weird year, and we had a smaller program than usual. But so this year we played 3 terrific shorts, Black Bodies, The Fourfold, and Like the Ones I Used to Know, 1 feature, Violation, and we had 1 New Frontier project. And I will say we did have 1 additional feature that unfortunately had to be withdrawn, that we had initially programmed. So overall, that's 3 shorts, 2 features, and a New Frontier project. It can vary from year to year. I want to be very clear that we don't have a quota in terms of country representation. We want to like represent as much of the world as we can. But I think this actually naturally leads to a point that maybe I didn't quite make totally clear earlier, which is, we do have ultimately a small program, so we're never going to play a huge number of films from any one country. And I think that can be, like, as a person who travels internationally a lot, that can feel discouraging to filmmakers. I just met with a Chinese company the other day, and they're like, well, how many Chinese films would you say you've played in your competition? And I would say, oh, well, in the last decade, I think we've played 3 Chinese films. And that's pretty good, actually. Like, when you consider all the countries in the world and that we have a 12-film international narrative feature competition, we're not necessarily going to play a film from every country every year. So like, it's definitely not like, oh, every year we're going to have many films from any one country. I will say, Canadian films, I think, generally speaking, every year we do have at least 1 in other sections, because this year the Canadian feature was Violation, which played in Midnight. Like it's an English language film. Obviously there's a little more. There's also more production happening in Canada, so we're seeing more films.
Yeah.
We have a great collaboration with Telefilm Canada, so we make sure that we get to see a lot of the Canadian films that might be right for us, which is incredibly helpful. We appreciate their support. So we do. I feel like we do see as many Canadian films as we can, and most years we program 1 to 3 features and at least that many shorts. But again, that's totally ballpark, and it can go up and down year to year. But that's just to say that's really good. Like country-wise, that's incredibly high. And yet I know it's not a high number of films at all. And that's just the nature, again, of us having a small program. But again, I think it's what makes us feel sure that we're giving the experience to the filmmakers selected that we want them to have, especially international filmmakers. I will say, like with US filmmakers, I think we have a little more of assumption that like, the industry kind of jumps in and like helps them guide their way through this, experience. With international filmmakers, it often that is the case too, but sometimes it's not. And I will say we do offer a lot of specialized support for the international filmmakers in our festival. That I'm one of the people who oversees, and it's a matter of like when films are selected, feature films are selected, we basically have a Skype or now a Zoom with every selected filmmaker, just to say like, where are you? Like, what is your festival experience? What is your background? What is your level of comfort? And based on that sort of initial conversation, I'll know that like maybe this is a filmmaker who is going to need a lot of support in navigating this experience, and we're happy to provide it. If it's someone who's like, oh, actually, I'm already, represented by a major agency, and and I have this and this, and I'm all set, I can be a lot more hands off and not worry. Now, but I also want to say when I say that we offer support, I'm never going to tell a filmmaker what to do. If they're making choices and they want to ask my advice, like I've done everything from like, give feedback on sales agents they're considering to looking at a cut of the trailer they're considering using. And I'm happy to do those things if they want that help and support. I'm never going to say, oh, you have to show me your trailer, or you have to run your sales agent by me. It is up to the film team. And if you have strong opinions and you know what you're doing, you don't need my support. That's okay. But after all these years at Sundance, it's the sort of the one thing that I'm really an expert on, so that I'm happy to offer it if it's helpful.
Wonderful. The support is there if you need it.
Yeah.
So good to hear. Okay, I'm going to get to a few attendee questions. Yeah. So this one's from Geraldine. She's asking, what are the festivals that you attend throughout the year?
So I try to vary different regional festivals every year. But also I have some regions that I focus on. So for me, I will usually, again, right now travel's weird, but I will usually attend Durban Film Art in South Africa, because it's a part of the world that does not have as many festivals, major festivals, and Durban Film Art has a major market for projects across the continent. So that's an incredibly helpful one. I normally will attend Haugesund in Norway, New Nordic Films, because it's a way to just sort of get a quick picture on what is going on in Scandinavian film in a given year. Obviously, I'll attend Cannes and Toronto. Those are the biggies, the big markets, so that I can, and those are great. So in terms of both meeting filmmakers, seeing the films that they're playing there to see what's going on at other major festivals. But it's also great because so much industry is there. You can kind of get a feel for all the projects that are already in the pipeline heading their way to us. So it's a really productive trip, both of those. And then beyond that, it's trying to find other festivals, places that I'm not necessarily going to go to every single year, but that I want to make sure that I'm engaging with the filmmaker community, letting them know who Sundance is. Internationally, that can be a big part of it. They either don't know Sundance, or they think Sundance is not interested in playing films from their part of the world. I hear that so often. And it really is we see a lot of films, but we're happy to keep seeing more, because we want to find those films that we can offer that best opportunity for, that are going to succeed, and we can launch them into the world. That is I will never feel sad about watching that number of films that we receive go up and up and up, because that's how we find films and support filmmakers. And, I can say in the first year I went to Durban, African filmmakers were you don't really want to play African film. Or the first year I went to Romania, Eastern European filmmakers were you don't really want to play Eastern European film. And we absolutely do. And we're so invested in this. And that's why we do so much international travel. And I do have a few other colleagues that they're traveling to other places. Obviously, there's only 3 or 4 of us really traveling a lot. So we're not able to cover the entire world, but we're doing the best we can, because we want is filmmakers from around the world, all parts of it, to feel like Sundance is accessible to them, and an opportunity that they can strategize around.
Amazing. Wow, you did travel before COVID. Oh my God. All these places, I'm so jealous. Oh my gosh. It's so wonderful. Okay, now we've got another question here. I hope I'm saying it right. Nazanin is asking, can you please speak about how the film premiere impacts the rest of one's festival strategy?
No, that's a really good question, because it's something that I think to a little bit of a degree is changing. But I think one thing that is important is, if you can, the world premiere should be at a festival with a large press and industry attention, because that's where you're going to get that sort of initial round of reviews in particular that actually feed further festival life and further opportunities moving on. I think what's really changing is that, I would say, 5 to 10 years ago, at least at my festival, and I think at a lot of other major festivals, it felt like a film had to sell right away, or it wasn't going to sell. And that is so deeply not the case anymore. Every year now it gets more ultimately most of our films do find distribution, but it's not the case at all anymore that most of them have distribution by the end of Sundance. So it is sort of cultivating that ongoing life, that ongoing buzz, audience positive reaction that that leads to distribution and streaming opportunities for films more and more. So like the launch is really important, but it's a little bit more of a long game than like you need that first, like that moment, that like big hit to sell it all. I don't think that's the case, but you do need it as the launching pad for the life of a film that's going to lead to that sale. And so like, so I do think choosing wisely in terms of a place that is going to create some buzz, whether it's a place that has like and it can be like, I think press attention is important, but also like a place that has a really vocal audience, like social media, there's good and bad to it, but like, non-press figures are getting their voices heard about films that premiere at festivals, and that you can absolutely use that to their advantage. I think about a festival like True False. And I mean, there is an industry, obviously, attendance at True False, but the attendees, the audience at True False is so vocal. I can just look at Twitter and I can see how a film is doing there. And you can use that to your advantage.
Absolutely. Okay, now you mentioned that it's a good idea, but not necessary for a film team to have an agent and publicist if accepted to a festival. Why is that? And how does that help with international distribution?
No, I should say, I want to be clear. I think it's a good idea to have a sales agent and publicist at Sundance. And it's really tied into what I was saying before about that sort of plethora of opportunities that can be incredibly challenging to navigate. The great thing about sales agents and publicists is they are extremely experienced in how to sell a film and get it to be seen in the midst of the tremendous competition at a festival like mine. I think you can be really wise and strategic about where you are playing and how much attention you need to give to this. If it's a smaller footprint, maybe you don't need a publicist. I still suggest a sales agent for international opportunities for selling your film, unless you're super versed in it on your own. These people have so much experience around this, and and unlike a publicist, which I know can be a considerable fee, one that is absolutely worth it at my festival, but worth weighing if your other festivals, whether you think it is. A sales agent isn't that fee on the front end, and they are a huge value in terms of knowing international markets, knowing where your film might sell, and proactively working for you in those ways. Again, unless you already have a ton of experience, it just feels like something that's almost always worth it. The publicist really is in a massive festival when there's 100 films at my festival, or 300 films at another festival, all competing for the same set of eyes. Having experienced people who know how to get eyes on your film can be incredibly helpful, and be the thing that really makes a difference between that launch in public opinion that again opens those opportunities down the road. Absolutely. And then speaking of opportunities down the road,
basically the next question is, how can this team help with distribution opportunities then?
This team being
the publicists and agents.
Oh, absolutely.
Opportunities.
So the sales agent, I mean, that's very much what they're working on. They are finding potential buyers for your film domestically or internationally who may be interested in it, and they're persuading them seems too strong a word. They're getting it in front of their eyes. They are making sure the people who may want to buy your film see your film, and they work very hard at that job, and they are very, very good at it. Now, the publicist is a little bit a step removed, but they're they are helping you get the press reaction, the reviews, the public attention that may raise an eyebrow of that potential buyer who wasn't sure if they wanted to see your film, and then they see a really great review or they see a really intriguing article, and then they think, oh, I will watch that film. So all of these people what they're doing is generating more attention around your film, which potentially draws those eyes of those decision makers who may buy it, or who may finance your next film, or who may just like your filmmaker and want to take them on as a client for all sorts of things. So that's really all their work is around, and it's something that they are incredibly good at, and I think is an incredibly specific and challenging field to be in. And so film teams can take a part of that responsibility on for themselves, but I do think having people who are experienced at it and absolutely know how the field works is really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, how can filmmakers access and leverage press industry coverage when showing at a festival? What's the best way to capture their attention?
Yeah, so I mean, I think this is the point where I think we have to talk about social media,
Yeah.
which is again, it's such a resource in many ways in a festival experience. You have these people working for you that like, you know, that will help you, but there are all these ways that you can help yourself. You know, if you have a, you know, if you do get a good review, you can blast it on your own social media too.
Mhm.
Let people see how people are reacting to your film. If you are in the audience, you know, if you are in the theater with an audience who is responding to your film, you can take a video from the stage, put that on your social. People see people loving your film. And the other thing that you can do on social that is really helpful and good is letting people get to know your team. You know, like it's a film and that's wonderful, but you also really help yourself and help your career going forward by like meet the filmmaker, meet the artist who created this film. It creates a level of investment in the audience. And I've seen so many filmmakers really capitalize on that. Like people who are smart at social media, there are all these opportunities to like, it's like, it's sort of like, it's like the Q&A after a screening, right?
Yeah.
If you're good at it, it can help you so much. And I understand it can be tough to do those Q&As, but if you're really withdrawn, like you can kind of ding the experience that an audience had just had with your film. But if you're just engaged, then you really can even persuade an audience that was on the fence about your film. I had a Q&A with a filmmaker who made a brilliant film, but a really controversial film that was at Sundance a few years ago. And I watched her in that Q&A just absolutely lean in to even the most challenging of questions with enthusiasm. And I will tell you, by the end of that Q&A, like that audience was absolutely won over by the experience of watching that film. And I think that's such a valuable trait to have. And it's something you can extend to the online presence of your film.
Absolutely. There's something about if you're passionate about a film, if you love the people behind it, you just love it that much more, right? Because you want to support them and see them succeed.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so the next question I have for you is, can you speak about the success for shorts and films? Can you think of an example of a short film that found success and then the filmmakers parlayed that into a feature?
So much all the time that happens.
Really?
And I want to say, like, I want to sort of differentiate this a little bit in two ways, because I think there are shorts filmmakers who go on to make a feature and have a lot of success. I think there's a smaller subset, but I think it's something that a lot of people get in their minds of shorts filmmakers who make a short and then turn that short into a very, like, a feature extension of that short. I think that success absolutely happens. I mean, like Whiplash comes to mind. It is more rare, and it is like, and I want to state that, Damien, he always knew that was a feature. So he didn't make a short and then the short was successful and was like, oh, maybe I can turn this into a feature. He always had the feature idea. And I think that's important, because it can be tough when you see the feature and you're like, oh, this is, just a feature version of the short that I already loved. What's new? What's, exciting? But I mean, I will even say this year we did have two examples of films that were shorts that felt like the filmmakers turned into features that felt fully realized and exciting as features. We had a film called Pleasure in our world competition, and we had a film called Superior in our US competition. Both of those films were based on short films we previously played, and now we've had the feature films at this year's festival. But what is even more the case is, like, we see shorts filmmakers, we're able to launch their careers as a shorts filmmaker. We love their work. And then, we're lucky enough that they come back when they make a feature and they've made another brilliant piece of work, and we're able to share it again and sort of like deploy that success. So I just want to say, there are times when you turning your short into a feature is a good idea. It's not always a good idea, and is not the only way to turn the success of a short into a successful feature. Like, if you will have that goodwill and that attention, even if you're not telling the same story again. Really be sure that you have a reason and a driving force to tell it in feature length. That's a little piece of advice. But I would say, I mean, gosh, I couldn't even say a number, but every year I would say like at least a half dozen shorts alum return with their features.
Really?
So it's absolutely, like, shorts are so essential, and I love them as their own art form. And so I'm not saying, oh, they're just the building block to a feature career. They're terrific in their own right. But that said, they aren't always, but they can be easier to get made. And they can sort of launch that reputation for you in that sort of career path, and in that sort of like, that awareness of press and industry that helps launch your career. And I will say, like, sorry, I'm like diverging a little bit, but I do want to talk just a little bit about the fact that, for Sundance, we do have a very strict premiere requirement for features. So we ask for world or international premieres for all our feature films. We don't have that for shorts, so that's part of the reason we see 10,000 every year. But the reason that we don't have it is because there are so many shorts made every year that we feel that we can deliver that press and industry attention and that experience we want filmmakers to have, because those people that come to our festival, they're not necessarily watching short films all year round. So whether or not it's a premiere, it's new to them, and they're trusting our curation to introduce them to these shorts. So we really feel like even a short, so short can play, one festival or 10 festivals, their chances are the same with us. And I actually think the opportunities they get out of our festival are the same with us, whether it's a brand new short or a short that's played, because they sort of still have, the eyes of the world around them, and so many future industry festival opportunities for filmmakers that we're able to give shorts. And I see that every single year, shorts filmmakers thrive.
Amazing. I love that. Now, Susie's wondering, what was the controversial film that won everybody over with the Q&A?
Oh my gosh. What is it called? I remember what happened in it so clearly. And
if you don't remember, that's totally fine.
I totally remember what it was, and it was a controversial film about an older woman, a Danish film about an older woman and her inappropriate relationship with her stepson.
Okay.
And it was very, very, very bracing and risque and bold and really a unique feminist vision. Mm-hmm. And there were definitely people in the audience that were taken aback, and she was like, please tell me why, and really not offended by any reaction at all. And it was so great. And the reason I'm so ashamed that I can't remember the title is I was so excited and proud of our audience because that film won the audience award that year. And
really? Wow. Good.
And it is not always the case that the controversial film wins the audience award.
Yeah. Well, that just goes to show, though, the Q&A, she won them over, and good for her. That's wonderful. Okay, now this next one's from Matt, who I have to say is our tech-savvy mastermind that makes these webinars all come together. He's asking, he'd love to know more tips and tricks to really crush a Q&A as a filmmaker.
What I would say is answer with enthusiasm, even if you're not necessarily answering exactly the question that was posed. I think we all have had that experience where the exact question that was asked is maybe not a terrific question or not a helpful question for you to answer. Answer the closest question that you want to answer, that you think actually will help the audience to hear about. I think you can turn what's your budget question, the dreaded what was your budget question, into a specific story about how you worked with a minimal budget or something that you were really proud that you were able to accomplish. So it's a storytelling opportunity, and it's honestly just engagement with the audience, actually not feeling withdrawn, not giving a monosyllabic answer. People really respond to you hearing their questions, and that's really all that it takes. And be ready with anecdotes, be personal. Mm-hmm. Those are the things that make a Q&A really work.
Right, really sell it. That's your chance to sell the audience. All right, okay, now Trady Six Productions is asking, if a feature film doesn't have any stars, what is the likelihood it may be accepted at large film festivals?
At our festival, perfectly, we don't consider ourselves a star-driven festival. We have a premiere section, which is maybe where you might see more star-driven films, although that not even necessarily, it's not necessarily specifically true. But we are entirely driven by filmmaking voices and what feels fresh. We consider ourselves supporters of fresh independent voices, and that is so much more important to us than seeing a familiar face or a famous face in a film. So it's not even it's not even a priority to us, especially in our competitions in our next section, to be targeting films with stars. Whether if it's someone we've never seen before giving an amazing performance, that is as exciting as someone that we've seen in other films saying, oh wow, they've never been better. So I don't think so the likelihood, it's hard to let me try to put a number on this, but for us, I can absolutely say that having stars is not what makes a film have a better chance with us. And I have to just So I was saying the movie's called Queen of Hearts.
Yes, I was going to say, Justine found it for us, Queen of Hearts. Thank you, Justine. There we go. Woohoo! We found it. All right. Our next question now. Do you have any advice for Alberta filmmakers positioning their projects for Sundance? If Sundance accepts only one Canadian project, are there any tips or considerations for Alberta productions to be considered?
I think, the advice I give to sort of every filmmaker, particularly every international film team, is to really sort of try to tell an authentic story in your own voice. I think, what sort of like, I hate to be negative, but like, don't try to make a film that emulates Sundance films of the past, because we're always like looking forward, trying to see, what feels fresh and new. And I would say, like, don't necessarily try to emulate an American indie. Like, especially with our international sections, but with all sections, what we want is films that feel authentic, feel genuine. And that's really what drives us. It's not a Canadian issue, but I will say in international cinema, one thing that so rarely works is when you're watching an international film and they've put it in English for no apparent reason. And you can tell that they think they've made a more marketable film that way, but they've lost authenticity. And so like really what we're looking for is like, if you have a film that's, set in a place, in a part of the world, we want to feel like we're having a glimpse into that part of the world. If I've never traveled there, I want to feel like I've been transported there through your film. But for all films from all parts of the world, really, I would say what drives us is fresh perspectives. It can be a new take on a story that we've seen before. But, what I always say is like, something that feels new and exciting always has the edge for us as a festival over something that feels really familiar, really, really solidly well produced. We're gonna go with what feels fresh. We're gonna go with what feels exciting. And that's just like, our sort of programming taste. So, I think my advice to the producers from Alberta, but to producers from anywhere is, be bold, be authentic, take risks. Those are the things that we respond to as programmers.
Be authentic. I love that. That's so important these days. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are wondering how Sundance, which is obviously a huge social event, dealt with the past year. What were some of your biggest struggles and how did you guys overcome COVID?
Yeah, it was a big challenge. And I will say, like, and I say that knowing like how tremendously lucky we were that we were able to have our 2020 festival in January, pretty much, in its full in-person form. And then, things changed very quickly right after that festival. And so that we were sort of, gifted the abundance of time to regroup, to consider what was possible, to consider what felt appropriate at like this really challenging time for the entire world. And then, and to consider what felt feasible. And for us, it was a lot of brainstorming, and there just came a moment where it felt like, we miss this connection. Like, we miss bringing audiences and filmmakers together. And if we can just strive toward that, like, just the idea that like, filmmaker meeting audience being what's so key to our experience, filmmaker in films being found by industry. If we can try to find a way to translate that to online in a way that we really feel like serves artists, then we want to do that. And of course, it's worth every bit of energy. I will say it was beyond daunting, but I will also say that by the time we got to this January and we had our online festival, and it was a festival that took place almost exclusively online, with the exception of a handful of satellite screens, which were done through partnerships in other cities where COVID levels were that it felt safe to have a drive-in screening. Or unfortunately, LA in January was not one of those cities. Nor was Park City. So we didn't, I personally didn't have any in-person interaction, but what we did was, really put all our resources into making online feel like the festival. We didn't want it to feel like just a screening platform. So we hosted live online Q&As for every world premiere film, so that, and so we had waiting rooms before the film, so audience could chat with each other before the film started. They could watch the film, and then immediately after the film, we did a live online Q&A with either myself or one of my fellow programmers, asking our own questions of the filmmaker, but also allowing the audience who just watched the film to like ask those questions of filmmakers. We did a lot of events just for the filmmakers to be able to meet each other and interact with some audience. So like sort of social online spaces. And we used our New Frontier space, which was entirely online. And I'm going to like sort of flounder even trying to describe it because my brilliant colleague Shari Frilo is the new frontier goddess. But like, so like it was a space where people could interact, sort of face to face, walking around in a virtual space, really almost creating that Sundance party atmosphere from your living room. And so like we were able to actually really have a spirit of connection. And when I saw that happening, like when my own friends who are like across the world saying, oh, I watched this movie, I want to tell you what I thought about it. Or like, seeing, filmmakers actually hear from audiences about their film. Or I will even say like, my family has, in all the years I've worked at Sundance, never attended the festival because I think that one thing we didn't talk about, but it's expensive. It's it's like you're devoting resources, and my family, they just have never been like, oh, let's do that. But when they could watch films from their own home, for the first year, my own family watched Sundance films, and for the first year, my family actually understands what I do for a living, which was very cool. And so like it really did feel like we were like sort of connecting people around the world. It felt really worth it, and I think it was worth it for audiences, and it was worth it for for artists, and it was incredibly rewarding and a ton of work, but it felt really, really good.
Good. Did you find attendance went up because it was more accessible for people? It did, hey?
Yes. Audiences were very high, and it was really terrific.
Amazing. Now, before we do our draw, Heidi, is there anything else you would like to add for today?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I hope this was helpful and gave people a little bit of an idea of like what attending Sundance was like. And I hope I didn't make it sound too daunting. I just want people to really feel like, if they prepare themselves, this is a place of an opportunity where there's so many ways that you can like further not only the future of this project, but the future of your career in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm. Heidi, you were so wonderful. I mean, I know there's so many takeaways that myself and all the attendees are so grateful that you shared with us today. So thank you so, so much. We appreciate you taking this time to be with us all today.
Yes.
All right, and with that said, it's now time for our draw. So if we can please have Colette Switzer come on to do the draw, this will be pretty fun. Hi, Colette. How are you?
I'm good. So y'all ready?
We're ready. Who's the lucky winner today? $500 towards an AMPIA development fund.
Adam Bentley.
Adam Bentley, congratulations. Woo! I hope he's online to accept his prize. We'll wait in the chat to see if he's there. I'm not sure. Okay, well, I think Adam has won. So congrats to Adam. I don't know if he's on here or not. Okay, well, while we're on here, I just want to thank everyone so much for being with us today. These webinars are so much fun. And like we said, there's going to be a lot more throughout 2021. If you're not already an AMPIA member, now is definitely the time to join. Oh, he's here. Okay, wonderful. Yay, Adam. We're so happy for you. So again, thank you all so much. And we'll hopefully see you again soon for another amazing webinar from AMPIA.